Good morning to all, and welcome to the 9th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Foreign Affairs. This is the committee's first public hearing, and today we are dealing with the draft summary of recommendations and conclusions of the 41st meeting of the Council of Trade and Economic Development, COTED. This meeting is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Members of the viewing and listening audience can send comments via email at parl101@parliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/TT Parliament, or on Twitter at Parliament. I want to welcome all the officials from the following organizations: Ministry of Health, Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. I now invite all of you to introduce yourselves, starting with the Ministry of Health.
Good morning. I'm Richard Madre, Permanent Secretary.
Hi, good morning. Forrest Khan, Chief Chemist and Director, Food and Drugs.
Good morning. Yvonne Lewis, Director, Health Education Division, Ministry of Health.
Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning. My name is Norris Herbert, Acting Permanent Secretary.
Good morning. My name is Donna Defoe, Senior Economist.
Good morning. My name is Trudy Lewis, Acting Senior Economist.
Good morning. My name is Dana Marie Isles, State Council 3.
Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association.
Good morning. My name is Joy Francis, Team Lead of the Trade Unit.
Good morning. My name is Christian George, Trade Specialist at the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association.
Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Good morning. Jennifer Daniel, Permanent Secretary, Acting.
Good morning. Jennifer Marchand, Director of the CARICOM and Caribbean Affairs Division.
Good morning. Lynn Mohammed, Foreign Service Officer.
Thank you very much. I now invite the members of this committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Pleasant good morning. Avinash Singh, Member.
Good morning. Shampa Kojo, Member.
Good morning. Roger Samuel, Member.
Good morning. Rodney Charles, Member.
Good morning and Merry Christmas. Terence D.L. Singh, Member.
And of course, Marlene McDonald, Chairman. And I'm going to endorse my Minister there, Terence D.L. Singh. I wish all of you all the best for the season, season's greetings, and happy and productive 2017. Now, we're going to get down to some business here that this COTED, this draft summary of recommendations and conclusions of the 41st meeting was referred to the House of Representatives and, of course, onward to this particular Joint Select Committee. And the meeting seeks to inform the public of decisions or actions taken during that 41st meeting, as well as to provide updates regarding a number of decisions and issues raised at the particular meeting. We're now going into opening statements, and I will now call on certain persons to do brief opening remarks, starting with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Richard Murray. And the operative word here, brief, Mr. Richard Madre.
Good morning again. And very briefly, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee and look forward to a productive meeting. And we will do what we can to respond to all your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Norris Herbert, Permanent Secretary, Acting, Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Chairman. We are happy to be here to participate in the contents of this particular meeting. As you may know, this organ of CARICOM is one of the most important ministerial organs. And this is specifically trade, but it also operates from a different set of paradigm, like for instance, environment, tourism, ICT, energy, transportation, etc. So the body takes different forms, but this meeting is to discuss the trade forum of the 41st session.
Thank you. Mrs. Jennifer Daniel, Permanent Secretary, Acting Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Good morning, members. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, as is indicated in the very name of the ministry, is responsible for the interaction with CARICOM, and as a result, we play a facilitating role. Specifically, with respect to the CSME, we are the point ministry, and we welcome the opportunity to clarify any questions or concerns.
Thank you. And Ms. Joy Francis, Team Lead, Trade Unit, Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association.
Good morning. I just want to say thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and the committee for allowing TTMA to participate in this particular session. Of course, we would like to, indicate about the private sector perspective, and that is where we will want to voice our concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, just before we get started, let me remind both committee members and officials present that all questions and concerns will be directed through the chair. That's one. Two, I want to remind members as well as officials to please activate their cell phones, your microphones, when they are acknowledged by the chair. And your cell phones, please turn it on silent or on vibrate, please. We begin. On the issue, we want to look at the issue of health first. Questions? Minister? Issue of health. Any questions on the minister on the health?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I see at 15.1 the Caribbean Public Health Agency as a competent regional body for the purposes of the Caribbean regulatory system for medicines. There has been a proliferation of advertisements with respect to herbal medicines in the country that I think has an influence on a number of vulnerable citizens. Who in Trinidad, is this body responsible for regulating medicines, and are they taking steps to ensure that our citizens are properly guided when they go to the pharmacy to purchase pharmaceuticals?
I will ask the Director of Food and Drugs to respond to that question.
Okay, Madam Chair, the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division is the competent authority under the Food and Drug Act and regulation with the mandate to regulate the sale, manufacture, distribution, and marketing of all drugs. By definition, herbal supplement and herbal drug would fall under the classical definition under the Act as a drug. So it is regulated by the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division through a regime of inspection and monitoring as it regards the sale and also the advertisement and what is stated on particular advertisement, be it print or electronic media. We have the Drug Advisory Committee that is appointed by the Minister of Health that has the mandate and responsibility to recommend to the Minister approval of any drugs that enters into the market for sale and distribution to the national public. So through the Drug Advisory Committee, of which they are an expert committee that would deliberate over submissions, clinical submission, and other submissions, and then they'll make a recommendation to the Minister of Health for his approval before the drug goes onto the national market. Thank you.
Follow-up question, Chair, through you. So when I listen to advertisements in the media about certain drugs, and I'm talking about herbal drugs, that will quote unquote make you a harder man and etc. Am I to assume that these drugs have been vetted by the appropriate organization which you have identified, and therefore I have some confidence that it meets some threshold of efficacy?
Okay, Madam Chair, as regards to herbal medicines that is manufactured in Trinidad and sold in Trinidad, it has been a debate at the division in terms of how do we monitor, how do we regulate this particular sector of the industry. And presently there are no regulation pertaining to herbal supplements. What? But there is a subcommittee of the DAC that would look at herbal supplements, that would determine the efficacy of it as well as the safety regarding usage. Some of the advertisements that are presently being made, I cannot say that it has been approved by the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, neither by the Drug Advisory Committee. So there are some issues regarding the advertisement, and also the evaluation of it is a bit difficult to undertake at this particular point in time. So we try as best as possible to do whatever monitoring that we can do to ensure the safety to the public.
Last question, Chair. So you're promising the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago that this matter is being looked at, and that you're going to look at the advertisements so to ensure that the interests of the population, the interest is protected. Can I rely on a promise?
What we can undertake through the work of the DAC is to relook these herbal medicines, develop some sort of strategy and policy to deal with herbal supplement that is offered for sale to the market.
So, Mr. Samuel.
Through you, Chair, to Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, we are in 2016, the end of 2016. And you were saying to this committee that it is something you're now looking into. Herbal drugs and medications and supplements have been on the market for years. And when I say years, since I'm a child and beyond that. I am disheartened that there are no systems in place, no processes, nothing could be used as a standard for evaluation of these medications. And you're now saying in 2016 it's something that you have to look into. I'm quite sad that that is taking place in 2016, while the market is flooded with herbal medications and supplements that are promising all kinds of benefits, but with no proof to it. Something has to be wrong. And to say that we are now looking into it is the horse has already escaped the stable and the starter, and it's gone. And now we are trying to catch it, to put some kind of system in place. Can you really promise us that something is being done, will be done, and give us some timelines with regards to that?
Okay, Chair, through you, the matter will be a matter for the Drug Advisory Committee to deliberate on. And previous Drug Advisory Committee have looked at the issue. However, a total comprehensive strategy in dealing with the issue has not been formalized at this point in time. But I can assure you that from the DAC perspective that they would look into the matter in terms of making certain recommendation for regulatory oversight. Because as I mentioned earlier, there is no regulation specifically that deals with herbal supplements. It is treated as a normal drug, an innovator drug, a generic. But there's no specific regulation that deals specifically with herbal supplement as a separate classification of drugs.
Okay, Mr. Khan, I want to intervene at this point. I am a bit taken back because these herbal drugs, it's a multi-million-dollar industry. And a lot of people are dependent on some of these herbal drugs, as opposed to the traditional medicine that we know about. And people rely on these things, especially when you have some serious ailment. So to hear this morning that there's no specific legislation or rules and regulations with respect to these additional herbal drugs in the system, I think it's a matter of concern, because every day you're hearing about more and more. If you listen to the radio station, you'll hear people promoting all these various drugs. If you take this, it will cure your diabetes in 1 week. It will cure this in 2 weeks. And we have to be careful as citizens, because it's, first and foremost, they are not cheap, you know. They are quite expensive. And yes, and no redress if anything goes wrong. So basically, you have given this committee here an undertaking that in the sooner than later, in the near distant future, you will, as a body, you are, Chief Chemist, Director, Food and Health Division, that you will do something, get it going in your ministry to have some sort of rules and regulation with respect to the disbursement of these herbal drugs. These herbal drugs are mushrooming all around the country, all over, and we should be concerned hearing what you have just submitted here this morning. Any further questions that you want to ask quickly? Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Outside of the herbal drugs, I just want to ask the officials at the Ministry of Health, seeing that the Chemistry, Food and Drug Lab has very far-reaching implications, I just want, out of clarification, I want to find out what is the functionality and capability of this lab as of today. I know we've had situations in the past where, for example, traceability of chemicals and pesticides on food, persons have raised concerns. Seeing that the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Lab is the authority to really monitor and evaluate, I just want to find out what's the status of that lab.
Good morning. There have been some challenges with respect to the functioning of the various labs under the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division. We are pretty far advanced with respect to proposals for bringing the facility back up to an appropriate standard. The issue has to do with the facility that houses the particular division. So such proposals are likely to be made to the Cabinet within the next month. Additionally, we are exploring arrangements to temporarily outsource some of those functions pending the refurbishment and enhancement of the existing facility.
Thank you, Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Chairman. And through you, there's a question with the fish supplies that are, and I'm talking about this in the context of the food marketing, portion sizes, nutritional standards. Do you have a role in determining whether the fish that consumers buy in Trinidad and Tobago meets the appropriate health standards? Because there seems to be a gray area, and at this point in time, I am not clear as a citizen of this Trinidad, when I purchase fish, that I am not taking a risk with my health.
Okay, through you, Chair. So within the confines of the Food Act and Regulation, there is the Fish and Fishery Products Regulation. And within that piece of legislation, it speaks to safety of fish in terms of how it is produced, how it is manufactured, how it is processed. As regards the testing, all fish, or most of the fish that are imported into Trinidad and Tobago is accompanied with a health certificate. The health certificate that is given by a competent authority of the country of origin. to certify that this fish product has been manufactured and satisfy the law of that particular territory. So we are sure through the health certificate that the fish that enters into the local market is in fact safe for human consumption.
Through you, I need to be clear. Are we dealing here with fish that is imported? But I'm asking about local supplies of fish. And I'm asking it under the 6-point policy that was adopted, which says nutritional quality of the food supply, levels of harmful ingredients. Can you say, or if it is not your responsibility, then you could probably guide us as to where we should seek to find out this information. Can we give a guarantee to the citizens of Trinidad that the local supplies of fish meet health standards and will not negatively impact on their health?
That responsibility will fall between the Ministry of Health, which has responsibility for surveillance of institutions that are selling various products, and the Ministry of Agriculture.
All right. Mr. Khan, I have one question before I hand over to Mr. Samuel. I want to go back to those herbal drugs. You talk about the state of the laboratories right now in your ministry. Is there any testing of these herbal drugs? Any testing done before these drugs are placed on the market, so citizens can be aware that when they take whatever drug, it will cure my diabetes in 1 week or 2 weeks. If I take these wonder drugs, these herbal drugs, I would lose weight. I will go quick now and buy them. I would lose weight overnight. Is there any testing done by your laboratory? Tell us about that, please. Because these drugs are coming on the market to the unsuspecting citizens. So tell us, what guarantee can you give us that these drugs are indeed tested?
Okay, as the PS indicated earlier, presently our labs are undergoing some refurbishment. So within the last approximately 2 years, the lab has been undergoing some refurbishment. So I cannot say to this committee that it has been tested in terms of the local manufactured products regarding herbal drugs. For imported drugs, we ensure that those are accompanied by something called a notice of approval, meaning that it was approved by the DSC, recommended by the DSC, and approved by the minister. But regarding the domestic market and domestic manufacturing, there's a gap that presently exists as it relates to the testing of these products.
So no testing is done on all these herbal drugs which originate locally? None?
At this point in time, Chair, there's none being done by the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division.
Okay, can you give this committee the undertaking that something will be done about the particular laboratory you all are doing? What is the level of refurbishment? Are these laboratories being refurbished at the moment? How long has it been going on? When is the due date when you're going to be finished refurbishing these laboratories? Could you give us a sense as to where we are going with this?
Our expected timeline for bringing the laboratories back up to a functional state is approximately 8 months. As you're aware, the country has significant challenges with respect to its built infrastructure, and the building that is housing the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, which has housed it for some time, for several years now, has been in a non-compliant state. So we do need to do some work on the building to ensure that it is functional. As I said, there's a project in train Some refurbishment works, I think, has already started, but our estimate is within 8 months, we will have most of the laboratories, of the various laboratories of that division back up into a functional state. And during the course of that period, there would be sequenced. So it is possible that some labs will be up and running before that period.
Okay, and that is 8 months as from now?
That's our estimate.
Okay, thank you. One more question on this and we move on. Aliyah, let Mr. Sir.
Chair, through you again. You said that the work being done is to bring the labs up to an acceptable standard. What is an acceptable standard? Secondly, are you saying that when in the 8-month period, subsequent to the 8-month period, you're going to now pull samples of all of these supplements and local drugs from the market and have them go through a rigorous testing to see if what is promised and the values of these things are really potent and what it's supposed to be? Thirdly, when this is done, what happens to the people who have been affected by the drugs that they have taken and it has done harm to them? What redress, seeing that you're now looking to regularize these things? If for some reason drugs have harmed citizens of this country, what redress the citizens would have? Because you did not test it before, you're now testing it after the fact. What is going to happen if these drugs have been harmful to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? My fourth question, that's a few of them. I recognize that the level of harmful ingredients are not on the labels of local produce. In other words, nobody knows the harmful contents, the side effects of these things. And if people do not know the side effects, when you test them and you realize that they are harmful in some ways, what happens to the people who have been taking them?
I will answer the first question, which is the issue with respect to the labs. It is the building that is a problem for us. It is non-compliant with regulatory OSH and safety requirements. So we need to get that building into a state that will allow the labs to be functional. And as I mentioned, that is expected to be undertaken over the course of the next 8 months. The other questions, I'm going to ask the director whether he can address them.
Okay, so I'll attempt to address some of the questions that's asked. One is in terms of the standard and the specification. There's an accreditation, an international accreditation system for labs. There's good laboratory practices that we would endeavor to achieve so that we're able to meet certain specifications and certain guidelines, international guidelines, and probably achieve accreditation with certain tests that is conducted at the lab, and also we'll endeavor to achieve good laboratory practices, apart from the OSH requirements and other national legislation that's going to play a role as regards the safety in the lab for our employees. As regards the harmful impact of drugs, through the pharmacovigilance system, where adverse events are reported, and this will be reported to pharmacists as well as more so doctors. And they're supposed to report this to the Ministry of Health, and then we can take whatever action we can take as regards the removal of particular drugs from the market due to adverse events or adverse reaction that is reported to us. So through the pharmacovigilance, we will at least pick up some of those issues and then deal with it in terms of removal of those drugs from the market at that particular point in time.
Okay, Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Permanent Secretary. You have indicated some of the short and medium-term measures which are necessary at this stage due to the neglect of chemistry, food, and drugs over the years. Can you inform the committee and the national public what long-term strategies you are taking to bring to Trinidad and Tobago world-class laboratory services?
So, Chair, there are In addition to bringing the division back up to an improved standard, we are also addressing and looking into proposals for the establishment of a national public health laboratory. Some work has already been done in terms of determining a site for that laboratory, and proposals are currently being finalized for a final submission to our cabinet, to the cabinet of the country for a decision.
Last question, Madam Chair. Could you tell me when did work start on bringing this national laboratory system on board to replace the old and dilapidated, not only systems, but buildings?
Well, the work to bring the CFDD back up to an appropriate standard was undertaken over the last year. With respect to the National Public Health Laboratory, I'm afraid I'm uncertain as to the timelines with respect to that particular project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Madri. As I move on, I just want to place on the table that in countries like United Kingdom and United States, once they import drugs into their country, they test all their drugs coming from foreign countries into their home country, just to ensure that it meets their required standard, and whatever standard that the drugs would say it has acquired. What I'm telling you, I heard you, or one of you in your statement said that with respect to the foreign drugs coming into the country, supplements, no testing is done because there is some notice of approval that is attached to each of these bottles of drugs. I am saying that we need, this committee, we would like to get explanation in writing, not now, but in writing, that at least for those foreign supplements coming to this country, that the notice of approval is insufficient. And we would like you, when you set up, when you have refurbished your laboratory and it's up and running and we are world standard, that you'll be able to test, because a foreign country just can't dump on us all these supplements, and just because it bears this label, notice of approval, we accept it, and our citizenry would be exposed to these drugs without us here taking the necessary steps to ensure that these products are good for consumption. Yes, I just wanted to flag that. But I move on to another issue on the health, which is a lot of concern for me, and that is obesity. You know, it is said that a healthy child will make a healthy adult. And at COTED, it was agreed that there would be further consultations on adopting a suite of policy actions in a step to looking at various areas in having healthy children. And one of them is mandatory food labeling, food marketing and portion sizes, nutrition standards and guidelines for schools and other institutions. I have noted with care a lot of fast food. People don't cook again in this country. On Sundays when I'm out, every food store, Denny's, I don't call the people names. Let me don't call the names. But all around, filled. Even my own favorite little spot. If I don't get there by 1 o'clock, food done. I am saying, and you see this, there's a particular store that has a piece of chicken, fries, a biscuit, and a soft drink for $20. Is that healthy for our children? I'm asking, what are we doing? Because this is one of the recommendations from COTED with respect to child obesity. Can anybody tell us this morning what has been done about curbing child obesity in Trinidad and Tobago? How far have we reached with the recommendations and decisions taken by COTED? Ministry of Health.
Again, I'll start by giving some statistics and then address one phase of the response, and then I will turn over to our Director, Health Education, to provide more details. But in 2009, an evaluation study was undertaken, which indicated that with respect to overweight issues and obesity in school children aged 5 to 18 years old, that problem had increased from 11% in 1999 to 23% in 2009, representing an increase of 109%. And regarding obesity alone, that is body weight in excess of 2 standard deviations from the norm, there was a 400% increase in obesity in children over the same 10-year period, from 2.5% to 12.5%. And of course, the high prevalence of childhood obesity will have the following consequences. There is likely to be an earlier onset of diabetes and hypertension, and there is also likely to be an early onset of an incidences of NCDs in general. And of course, the NCD problem in our country does require heavy investment in the health sector. It costs us to manage this problem, which to a large degree is a result of personal lifestyle choices. The government, however, does recognize that it has a role to play in changing this culture and encouraging shifts in our behavior patterns, but also recognizes that this is both a whole of government and a whole of society responses are needed, because the determinants of this unhealthy behavior are due to a whole range of various factors. So in July 2016, the Cabinet agreed to a strategic framework for non-communicable diseases, inclusive of a strategic plan, priorities, and outcomes. And the 4 key objectives of that policy and plan are to develop policies and partnerships for NCD prevention and control, inclusive of developing greater multi-sectoral action with all sectors of government and society, and their integration of into the planning framework, and also into our development and economic agendas. We intend to focus on various NCD risk factors and protective factors to reduce the prevalence of the main risk factors and strengthen protective factors with an emphasis on children and adolescents. We will use evidence-based health promotion strategies and policy instruments, including regulations where necessary, and inclusive of monitoring and voluntary measures.
Mr. Charles, you finished, sir? Sorry.
Well, there are 2 other areas. The health system response to NCDs. We will improve coverage and equitable access to primary health care. So there's going to be a particular focus on primary health care, and we're going to improve our NCD surveillance and research. We have also negotiated a loan with the Inter-American Development Bank in the amount of approximately $50 million US to develop a program of projects over the next 5 years that will focus on this significant problem facing our nation, and with a particular focus on child obesity. And with that, I would like to turn over to the Director of Health Education, who has been doing quite a significant amount of work in the field, unless there's another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the question raised by COTED, I'd like you to know that the Ministry of Health has been working to finalize the nutrition standard for food offered to children in schools. This has been taken by the Honorable Minister of Health, Mr. Terence Dayal Singh, and it has been shared by the Minister with the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Education. So indeed, there is activity with respect to finalizing that standard. Also, Madam Chair, the Ministry of Health has continued using an all-of-government and all-of-civil society approach, and in 2016, the Honorable Minister did meet with members of the beverage manufacturing sector of Trinidad and Tobago, looking at the recommendations of WHO that in relation to childhood obesity, a lot of the extra calories come from free sugars that are in beverages, non-alcoholic beverages. And that consultation was held. The beverage manufacturers were asked to look at WHO recommendations and also to come up with a strategy and commitment to achieve the WHO recommendations with respect to added sugar in locally produced beverages, sugar-sweetened beverages. I would like you to also note, Madam Chair, that they did come forward with the recommendations, and those were shared with the Minister of Health, and they are actively being pursued. With respect to the other initiatives of the Ministry of Health in relation to childhood obesity, the Permanent Secretary would have shared that the Ministry of Health has now an approved National Strategic Plan for NCD prevention and control. A large part of that plan is dedicated to the health of children and reducing the growing incidences of childhood obesity. That plan was approved in 2016, and it is being operationalized as we speak. Operationalization of that plan in relation to childhood obesity began in October of 2016, and we started first with conducting a survey of BMI, which is Body Mass Index, and evaluation of school food options. This is being done in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. That has started. We have selected the schools, and actually today we are sensitizing principals of schools selected to be a part of that survey. What that would do, Madam Chair, it will allow us to monitor what's happening with the level of obesity in children. We recognize that over a 10-year period, it increased by 400%. This new survey will give us what the current position is. It would also include an evaluation of what is being offered. Madam Chair, you did mention the sale of not only sugar-sweetened beverages, but food that is high in fat and salt. This evaluation would also include an assessment of the food that is being served in terms of how it is prepared and the levels of salt, sugar, and fat in the foods offered to children. Again, that would provide the evidence that we need going forward. Yes.
Sorry, the question, it's the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Madri. Now, you know there's a school feeding program. Mr. Wistu, you could answer. There's a school feeding program in the Ministry of Education. Have you all liaised with them so we will know the nutritional values of the food, you know, being given to our children? As I said, a healthy child, you know, will turn into a healthy adult, you know, because there's a proliferation now of these surgeries all over, you know, because, you know, as you get old and you get bigger and whatnot, and you can't do it on your own. So we resort to expensive mechanisms of, you know, of cutting and tucking and whatnot. So I am saying, if we start, you know, in the schools, and I think that I like what Ms. Lewis has just said, but I know there should be a synergy between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. Read the school feeding program so you have balanced meals and that soft drink business and the fat control and whatnot, carb control with respect to our children. Do we have that in place?
Firstly, Chair, we agree fully with your suggestions and also endorse the fact that it is necessary to change the culture at the time of childhood, so that by the time we get into teenage life and our children move from teenage life into adulthood, their behavior patterns are already ingrained. So it is crucial that our focus continue to be on child obesity. Yes, there has been collaboration with the Ministry of Education, and we expect that handshake will strengthen over the coming years as we roll out the program of projects under the IDB arrangement. But I will ask the Director of Health Education to give us some more details on what has already been undertaken with the Ministry of Education.
Thank you, PS. Yes, Madam Chair, in relation to your question whether or not the National School Dietary Services Limited is involved, they are indeed involved, and they have actually partnered with us in the development of the standard, and moving forward, they will continue to be a partner with us. Madam Chair, taking the maternal and child health approaches to prevention and control of NCDs has been a priority strategy for the Ministry of Health. So as we commence the implementation of the NCD plan, the Honorable Minister is taking forward a suite of actions that would look at promoting healthy schools. And so we have a number of recommendations that have gone forward, and these will include, but are not limited to, looking at what is offered for sale in schools, particularly in relation to sugar-sweetened beverages. And we would want to start there. The other areas that are to follow, Madam Chair, includes strengthening and building supportive environments for physical activity as a part of the IADB loan for the NCD plan. One component of it is supporting the creation of environments that would facilitate physical activity in the school and in the community, and actually supporting the building up of that infrastructure. Finally, Madam Chair, although we are talking about childhood obesity, and at the moment I'm responding to children 5 to 18, we have gone even further back, and we're looking at it from conception. So there is another initiative of the Ministry of Health that is being implemented, and this one looks at universal screening for diabetes in pregnancy. And that's where it will start, and also promoting healthy development of children in utero. This will now be another initiative that should start 2016 as we seek to address childhood obesity, not from the point of primary school, but from conception.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to move on now to Ministry of Trade, could be Trade and Foreign Affairs. The Minister has to take his leave now. There was a special session of COTED with respect to the private sector. And this is an area that has really tickled my concern. And it has to do with respect to the challenges and priorities for the Caribbean private sector. My question to Ministry of Trade, I want to ask you, what is the impact that the increased private sector relations would have on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, given the fact that we know what are the challenges with respect to government revenues and whatnot? What role do you see the private sector playing in this scenario that is happening now to assist us not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but the wider, but we're dealing with Trinidad and Tobago now. And I know that COTED had a special meeting, discussions, decisions, recommendations coming out. What are your views on this, and how could you assist the private sector in advising them on how to go about assisting the public sector in this difficult time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll start by just saying that the entity that trades is really the private sector. There was a time when there were public sector agencies involved, but that has given way to generally private sector activity. In this body, the private sector involvement comes in two forms. One, it comes through national delegations. So for instance, in our delegation, we would have the TTMA, the Chamber of Commerce, sometimes the local poultry producers, etc. But in addition to that, the private sector is also there, sometimes in its own right, especially in the form of Caribbean private sector organizations. It happens at this level, the ministerial level. There are times when, through the CIC, the heads and maybe Foreign Affairs can say a bit more about that, meet with the private sector in their various fora. But the point is that everything we do in terms of increasing trade, we generally represent the private sector. And we are often faced with a contradiction, because there's often one group in the private sector who wants to import things, and there's another group who are producing. And we often have to find the right balance, because the production contributes directly to the economy and growth and that sort of thing. And the import, whilst there's a contribution in that aspect, also helps to impact prices to the average citizen. So our task in terms of regulating the private sector and their contributions and that sort of thing also always requires to meet with them individually and collectively and try to find the balances for the optimal benefit of the country as a whole. And that we carry to the COTED and we debate in the same context at that level, Madam Chair.
All right, to the TTMA. TTMA, I have a question. Can you see the private sector assisting in improving our relations with foreign countries and really expanding investments in, sort of requiring investors to come into our country? Can the private sector be that vehicle that can be utilized? How do you see it from your perspective?
All right, thank you very much for allowing the TTMA to speak. With regards to that particular question, we do believe that the private sector could play a key role in terms of connecting, you said, with the foreigners and investment. We believe that its role would really be, driving trade, driving economic development, and it would be, making sure that there is some sort of system in place to have the vehicle to get, imports and exports into the country. So the private sector has a role to play since they are the ones that are driving trade itself. So they do have a role in terms of making sure that we do get investment, but we also need, of course, support from the government in terms of getting that framework in place. So we believe that the private sector should have a role.
How successful do you think that the private sector is in marketing Trinidad and Tobago to foreign countries at this point?
Again, thank you, Chair. One just has to look at the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is a small island developing state and that the manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago are, by any standard, small. We have actually been able to penetrate several markets, including the US, Canada, the UK. That is actually testimony to the fact that Trinidad and Tobago actually can do Trinidad and Tobago manufacturers, can do a pretty good job at actually marketing Trinidad and Tobago. And when it is you have foreigners, citizens from these other countries picking up a product and seeing made in Trinidad and Tobago, that is actually marketing for Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, the private sector can actually, as you would have asked, market Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Charles?
Thank you, Chair. I was listening to a television program, and Ambassador Sanders, I think, CARICOM. He's from Antigua and Barbuda to the United. He's saying in the United States, when the government negotiates, they negotiate on behalf of the private sector. And it is the private sector that actually drives the content and direction of the negotiations. Is there that synergy in Trinidad between the private sector and the government such that when you go to negotiate, you are representing their interests and by extension the country's interests?
Sure, sorry.
Chair, the private sector, in my view, is pivotal to attraction of investment. One only has to look at the more successful businesses in the non-energy sector, and even the energy sector, but more so in the non-energy sector. The joint venture arrangements, which means that the local businesses interfaced with international businesses to bring about some of the more successful businesses traditionally in Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, in terms of the negotiations, we operate what we call a technical coordinating committee. And in that, we bring together all the private sector, TTMA Chamber, AmCham, TTCSI, and others, and we match them with the public sector, and we discuss how we proceed with negotiations. Because at the end of the day, as I say, the investment is a private sector. In addition, when we go around the table, the private sector is often there with us, unlike some of the Latin Americans who put aside their private sector in a room far away from the negotiations. We actually bring our private sector to the table once there is no confusion with our party. But generally, that's the practice.
Follow-up question, Chair. So in respect to the negotiations with Caribbean, is the Canadian non-reciprocal arrangement where we trade with Canada, and negotiations are ongoing. Is the private sector involved in that negotiations? Because my understanding is the EPA, that it was designed in such a way that we allowed significant access to European businesses to compete with our local businesses, and therefore, had they had an input into it, it might have been a little more balanced. Is my understanding incorrect? And could you clarify in terms of the role of the private sector in ongoing negotiations, like the EPA, like the Caribbean?
Madam Chair, through you.
Sure.
I think your understanding is incorrect. The Caribbean, for starters, is a unilateral arrangement, and there were no significant exchanges on that. What was taking place is a negotiation between CARICOM and Canada to replace the Caribbean arrangement. And in both that and the EPA negotiations, the private sector was fully involved. In some cases, they even were in leadership position in groups of negotiations. So the private sector, from all practical standpoints, have been an integral part, and they have helped to how we fashioned the various lists in the various disciplines, whether it's services, goods, even intellectual property, and so on. They were a clear partner in that process.
Mr. Samuel? Minister, any questions? Okay. All right. Yeah.
just for my information, have we started or are we thinking about, have we approached or not taken a decision not to approach the Mercosur group in terms of whether we would need to seek trade preferential treatment with that important body in South America?
The Mercosur group, we do not have an engagement arrangement with the Mercosur group. The Mercosur group itself has, when they formalized their bloc a couple of years ago, have decided that negotiations would have to be with the bloc as opposed to individual members. There was a time when we were meeting with various members, but that did not materialize. So we have not taken a decision to move there, but if we move there, we would have to engage all of Mercosur as opposed to Paraguay or Argentina or Brazil, that sort of thing.
Okay, question. You have a question, Mr.?
Question, Chair, is that would be a Trinidad initiative or a CARICOM initiative, or both?
It could be either, but Article 80 of the treaty requires sign-off of CARICOM, where trade agreements are negotiated, especially when tariff concessions are involved.
The question, I want to look at the implementation of the CARICOM, single market. What is the status at this point in time, either TTMA or Ministry of Trade? What is the status with respect to the development of the community public procurement regime? Could you tell us where we are at this point?
The CARICOM has been working on this regime for a while, and it is at a stage of maturity, but for Trinidad and Tobago, we have had to tread cautiously since our own procurement regime hasn't been finalized. So we have not been able to give a full commitment as to where our position would be for Trinidad and Tobago, but we have participated in the discussions. We understand what are the thresholds, what are the scope of entities covered, the rules and that sort of thing, but we have been kind of stymied because of our national situation with the procurement regime to replace the existing Central Tenders Board ordinance.
So are you saying that, because of our own problems here with procurement, is there a problem with our procurement in Trinidad and Tobago that would not allow us to pursue this policy with respect to the Caribbean?
Well, there's not an overt problem, but you see, once the discussion is taking place in our parliament, and you'll be very familiar with the situation, we would try to ensure that we do not overcommit.
Okay.
We are not sure what the eventual outcome will be.
I understand, yes. Once we have to settle our business in-house first. Minister?
Thank you. With regard to the World Trade Organization, one would think that, I think there's a feeling that many of these large organizations are far away from the realities of what we do in terms of trade. What is the alignment in terms of the Ministry of Trade and the World Trade Organization insofar as it relates to building trade capacity, technical capacity to create greater trade facilitation?
Trinidad and Tobago, as you know, is Chair Trio. As Trinidad and Tobago has been a member of the organization for a couple of decades. And back in 2005, I think it was, after a number of years of developing countries making representations, because developing countries have always felt that they have not been getting a fair share of world trade. And after various rounds of negotiations and development issues and the Doha development agenda being stymied, the decision was taken that there would be what was referred to as an aid for trade emphasis. And especially in the case of trade facilitation, which is one of the Singapore issues which developing countries had deferred and they did not go along with for a long while. Once that was established, that we would go along with that, the aid for trade issue was used to help build capacity in developing countries. So countries in the multilateral system were encouraged to develop this strategy, and Trinidad and Tobago has just approved its own strategy, aid for trade strategy, and that will be useful in helping in areas like trade facilitation as we seek to build a more enabling environment. So in terms of trade, that effort would contribute to our businesses being able to be more efficient and that sort of thing in taking advantage of opportunities. But the issue of having a fair share in trade will always continue to be a major sticking point for developing countries, including Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if that answers your question.
To some extent, but as we speak about... To some extent, but as we speak about developing countries, I think we are also concerned about the Doha development round and where it's heading, because that favors developing countries. How can we position ourselves to ensure that this does in fact happen, and what is the region doing about that?
The real outcome is that the Doha development round has essentially slowed down considerably. And the developing countries, especially the LDCs, are very dissatisfied. And that is what has impacted on the overall movement, because in some areas, countries like India, Brazil, etc., are saying, look, things that favor developing countries are not being given the same emphasis as what is happening in the developed world. And in a broader sense, those kinds of, the fact that the movement in the multilateral agenda has slowed down, I think, in my respectful view, is what is impacting in the developed world. So that is where the United Kingdom now has its own problems, America has its own problems, you know, and that is playing out in the developed world because the progress that the developed countries used to take for granted, they are no longer able to, because the developing countries with China playing a role, India, Brazil, all those sort of things, they have now impacting on that, and the world trade order is gradually changing.
Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Chair, through you to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Trade, and to the private sector. How does Trinidad and Tobago rate in terms of the ease of doing business, and where's the trajectory? Are we, by international rating agencies, are we becoming, is it better to do business here, or is it getting, has it plateaued, or is it getting worse? That's one question. And the second question is, do we have, in terms of facilitating our competitiveness and capacity building, do we have a competition policy in Trinidad, or is it being contemplated such that, for example, the banking sector, we see that rates to the consumers are moving pari passu, as if there is some form of collaboration. And this is inimical to our trade and business as we move in the global arena. Is there contemplated a competition policy? And that's the second question. The first question, the ease of doing business in Trinidad.
All right, thank you very much for the question. The ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago it's not the highest in the region, not the highest in the world, obviously. It's not the lowest either. I'll start by saying that. But it has been improving over the years. The Ministry of Trade and Industry has implemented several measures since I have started working at DTMA 5 years ago, and they have borne fruit. The single electronic window, for one, is one that has actually, and the Ministry of Trade continues to add to that single electronic windows, but that's actually one that has actually improved the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. So there have been improvements over the years, and the government continues to put measures in place to improve the ease of doing business. The second question spoke to competition policy. I'll just touch briefly on that based on what I know. I know that the Fair Trading Act, parts of it have been proclaimed, and there's supposed to be a commission, the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission is supposed to be operational soon. I'll leave it to the Ministry of Trade to give more details on that, but I do know that parts of the act have been proclaimed.
I have a question, and maybe as you deliberate, you could answer with it. We said a short while ago that there are challenges and whatnot with the private sector. But my question is, can the private sector, again, I'm going back to that, can the private sector assist in improving our relations with foreign countries and thereby increase our marketability of Trinidad and Tobago regionally and internationally? Then, if there's a problem, I want to find out whether there is any challenges with respect to an appropriate legal framework that should be existing or is non-existent or is not being utilized to help us facilitate intra-regional trade or international trade.
Thank you again. With regards to the private sector, how would you say being that to drive economic trade and of course to have, to bring, you said, foreign investment. The private sector do have a role to play. However, there are some issues in the, how would you say, in the business environment that may not be allowing them to really reach their full potential. There could be, as you said, there may be legislation, some legislation that need to be put in place, policies that need to be put in place. For example, you may consider maybe some sort of economic diversification policy that really could address in terms of how we could, the manufacturing sector could be where it should be. So there need to be some sort of policies and legislations in place. Also looking at innovation, also research and development. All of these are key aspects if you want the manufacturing sector to grow and to also to reach its fullest potential to reach internationally and also regionally.
I think you have Miss Francis.
Miss Francis. Yes.
I think you have come close to what I want to hear, because I'm not getting a sense as to why. Because at this point in time, if we ever needed the private sector, it is now. It is now we need them, and I want to find out what are those challenges, and this is the remit of this committee. What are those challenges? Because we want to see, maybe it's a model in my head. We like to see the private sector doing much more, you know, and using, as I said, the private sector as that vehicle for foreign investment to go out there and do things to market Trinidad and Tobago and thereby bring that much needed foreign exchange and whatnot. I don't know, Foreign Affairs, you could help me? I don't know, you know, if I'm really saying exactly, I'm trying to say as best as possible what is in my mind. I am getting a sense that there's some challenges and they're holding back, but I know some people don't want to say, right? But What is it? I don't know. If it's just, as the chairman, I'm seeing what is it? Tell me, because I want to see the private sector play a bigger role. You know, we keep saying all the time that private sector must assist the public sector, and we must okay. We are under the public sector is under dire pressure now. What are we doing to facilitate trade? How are we doing that? And we want to use that, as I said, the conduit, the mechanism, to penetrate foreign countries, be it in the Caribbean, be it internationally. What mechanism are we using? What are the challenges? Let's put it, so is it something that is legislative? What is it?
Sure. If I could just add to that, and you certainly have valid concerns in that the role of the private sector and its engagement with the public sector is an absolute marriage for furthering economic growth. But insofar as trade facilitation goes, the question is, how has Export TT been working with the private sector to deepen the penetration of the market penetration of our locally produced goods and services? I think that's where we want to go. Chair, if I'm, yes. Yeah, sure. Well, how has Export TT been working with the private sector?
Chair, I think we have a couple issues on the floor. And I'll treat with the last one first. I think that the facilitation of the private sector has a number of dimensions. So if we consider that there are different elements of the private sector, so we have our local manufacturers, then we have chamber, we also have AmCham, which is connected to the American chamber side of things. We even have Euro Chamber, which is a recent vintage. And these organizations, as far as we are concerned, are critical to working with our domestic institutions. So, for instance, Export TT has identified the firms and tiered them. So you have firms of different capabilities. And what is recognized that they require different kinds of assistance for different markets. To this, you have to add the institutional mechanisms that we have or should have out there in various countries, because at the end of the day, that is where the investment arrangements would happen and the exports will eventually take place. So the network of facilitation that we have out there in countries are critical to facilitating the investments and the exports. Now, we are still at the stage where those arrangements are being rolled out. And traditionally, at various points in time, sometimes we have, sometimes we don't have. But as a country, we really need to have structured arrangements. So if we take, for example, Costa Rica, who signed an agreement with us in the mid-2000s, they place what they call Procomer here. And Procomer, it handles investments, it handles exports, where arrangements are stuck, they unstick it. And we need that sort of facilitation. So the point is that the AmCham and so would use their networks to facilitate business activity. All right? Even some of the TTMA and so might be able to engage in it. But you need the private initiatives working in harmony with the institutional arrangements that government can put to support. That's the first thing. The second question was from the member, Mr. Charles. The issue of the ease of doing business. We are generally around the same area in the middle here. We are at 96 now, but essentially we go up and come down from time to time. But as a country, I think the last significant improvement was when we did some insolvency partial legislation, and that moved us up a little bit. But essentially we're in the same area. We really need to address a number of cross-cutting issues. And it goes beyond individual ministries. And to the extent that we can solve those issues, payments, construction permitting, in terms of how long it takes to get approvals and those sort of things, until we can solve those, we would not be able to make significant improvements. We in the ministry have identified the things that we feel can get us up the scale, and we are working with the expectation that we will get the coordinated attention to treating with those issues.
Chair, thank you very much. With regards to the request based on the report from Belize for market access to poultry and beef and stuff in Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to find out what kind of impact you would see it having on the local poultry and beef industry and the distributors in Trinidad and Tobago. And there was the idea of the avian influenza, and what kind of assessment is being done with regards to that? What measures and penalties are in place to deal with the importation of infected and contaminated foods into Trinidad and Tobago? What is your take on it?
Anybody want to? All right. Sorry. Yes, sorry, Chair. Clearly, we are in an age of competition, and Trinidad and Tobago is a major beneficiary of CARICOM trade. So, in my own view, Trinidad and Tobago has to be open to engaging in trade with its CARICOM partners, because Trinidad and Tobago is the major beneficiary in the region. The regulatory aspects are not to be underplayed. They are important. And the Ministry of Agriculture has pest risk analysis and various risk assessments that they, together with the CFOs and the other regulatory agencies, which they are required to apply when these things are being imported. Of course, we heard of all the problems with labs and all of that. And in a real sense, that is no excuse, because we are required to put our national infrastructure in place, and we trade and we benefit from other countries. And very often, we at the Ministry of Trade find ourselves in a position where somebody will say, well, we can't get anything into Trinidad and Tobago, and everything is coming from Trinidad and Tobago to our shelves. And here we have to try to get some mediated effort to resolve the problem. Of course, in 2016, we are not where we were in 2009. There is now a CCJ. So many of these items will in the near future find themselves to be resolved in that institution. So my take on it is that Trinidad and Tobago has to be as efficient as it can be in terms of relating the trade, because we export things and we import things, and in the majority of cases, our exports to the region supersedes our imports.
I am glad, PS, that you spoke about the issue of labs, because at present you're actually saying to me that we are not capable of doing the kind of testing and regulatory checks and balances necessary to protect the citizens and the industry in Trinidad and Tobago, because the labs are not functioning to its highest capacity and stuff like that. We are in a dangerous situation. It is one thing to say that we export a lot and we're not importing and we have the imbalances. It's another thing to say that when we import these items and they're entered into Trinidad and Tobago, that they are tested and checked for what is necessary. And if the labs are not doing the necessary work and they're not up to the standards, the international standards, then we are in trouble in Trinidad and Tobago. At present, I am talking about now. In 8 months, I don't know what will happen. The promises of all kind of checks on the Ministry of Health and stuff like that. But we are in trouble now. How do we deal with it now? It's raining now, right? So how do we deal with it now?
Well, Madam Chair, I think we need an umbrella to protect us from the rain. But one of the main was.
No, I wish to correct the Honourable, my colleague, Honourable MP. Testing is being done, but it's testing, yes, so it is being done by Kariri and other agencies, so that we are not affected in any which way. It's just that over the last few years, there had been some problems with the lab under the control of the Chemistry, Food and Drugs Division, and there's not a physical space for it. And there was, in fact, available to us, I think which would have been around 2011, 2012, 2013, or sometime around there was a facility that was available to us, so that we could have upgraded and put in place a new lab, but it was never taken advantage of. So that funding, and it was grant funding, went by the way, because it was not seen it fit. It wasn't seen fit by the last government to put this in place. But what I say to you is that, and the ministry officials will confirm, that all of the testing is available and is being done by other organizations.
If I may just add to that, firstly, the Chair, just clarifying that the CFTD is responsible for doing testing on processed foods, whereas the poultry imports are likely to be unprocessed. And I'm just endorsing the information I'm receiving that our understanding is that tests can be done by other institutions, including, I'm told, with respect to fish products, it is sometimes done by the US FDA on our behalf.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to come back to some trade questions. My concern, manufacturers earning foreign exchange as opposed to importers consuming foreign exchange. I just wanted to find out what are some of the initiatives, whether it be TTMA or ministry, doing to assist these entities in expanding their business portfolios. Secondly, what mechanisms are in place to facilitate trade through export TT, especially the small and medium businesses? I'll reserve the last one for Ministry of Foreign Affairs when we come to that. But these two questions coming back from trade. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. George.
All right, thank you, Chair.
TTMA.
And thanks for the question. The Ministry of Trade and TTMA and Export TT have been actually doing quite a lot, I'll say, over the past few years. Minister Gopi Skuno have actually led a delegation to Cuba recently to actually get more of our manufacturers into that market. Trade missions is most definitely one way in which we can actually help manufacturers get their goods out so that we can actually earn some foreign exchange. Additionally, there have been some training sessions undertaken by both Export TT and TTME geared towards the SMEs in various topics, accounting and HR and overall. So it really is to ensure that the new upcoming manufacturers actually understand what they're getting into and drive home to them that it is important that they actually look abroad, don't stay domestic, look abroad. And finally, at least from TTME side, the Trade and Investment Convention, which is held annually by the TTME with support from the Ministry of Trade, actually is another avenue where we actually bring several companies from abroad, various countries, too many to mention, to actually purchase locally produced goods. These are some of the initiatives which the TTME, in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, have actually done to ensure that we actually have more products exported.
Yes, just to add to that, the Export TT, in addition to trade missions, and they have just encapsulated a project, Fit for Europe, where they have exposed a number of businesses, and the businesses have testified to how much benefits they received. And following from that is a mentorship program to help the smaller businesses move forward with grasping export opportunities. The Export TT also have support arrangements in terms of helping businesses with product development, labeling, etc. So in a number of ways, the Export TT program that they have contributes to working with these businesses. I think there was still a question on the competition environment. Oh, no, maybe I should deal with the foreign exchange issue first. And we might be a bit out of context because this is really...
Chair, with respect to that, as I said, it was just my personal view that manufacturers earning foreign exchange as opposed to importers consuming. From the trade side, what initiatives is available to these types of businesses? So it's nothing, not to go into the foreign exchange remit. It's just the manufacturers with the capability of earning foreign exchange from the trade side. How are we facilitating to expand their business portfolios? I think Mr. George would have addressed most of the concerns I had with respect to some of the initiatives. Thank you.
All right. That's good because foreign exchange, you have to earn it to get it, and it has to be somewhere if it has to be distributed. So the fact that companies earn foreign exchange is fundamental to the availability of exchange in the country. Still on the ease of doing business, I did not mention that in the Ministry of Trade, we have an expanded project with the IDB fund. It's IDB fund. It's 25 million. It's really about strengthening the single electronic window system. So we have some 40-something e-mobile arrangements in place, and we are expanding it among the various agencies so that a lot of the processes that you do manually will now be in the electronic realm. And we hope that that will make a significant contribution towards how we move forward because we have identified a number of areas that we need to address to move up in the ease of doing business ranking. Finally, before the issue of competition was raised, and competition is governed. You will see inside this report here, there's a competition commission in Suriname that governs all of CARICOM, and then some countries have national commissions which feed into the regional commission. Now, for instance, in our commission, there are a couple areas that don't fall under their remit, under the fair trade. Like, for instance, you mentioned banking. They were omitted. And then there's the RIC, who deals with one area, and TAT, which deals with another area. So the domestic rules will govern those areas that fall on it. And where they are outside of that remit, the regional regulations and commission takes effect. So eventually all are caught, but it's just a question of where you fall.
I just wanted to bring a little more clarity to, further clarity to one of the issues raised with regard to foreign exchange and manufacturers, and just remind us all that the Minister of Finance in 2016 did announce that there will be a facility for the provision of foreign exchange for manufacturers for the purchase of raw materials, so that again, what we're getting at for the purchase of raw materials, so that ensuring that there is local product, and there's input into local product available for export, so that there is which is what we badly need in terms of earning revenues. As we speak, I am aware that the Ministry of Trade and Industry, along with the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance, are in meetings. They've held meetings, and much progress is being made, so that that's a facility that we can expect manifested in the not too distant future. And that was an announcement made by the Minister of Finance.
Chair, I thank you for that clarification, because the information in the public domain as to where our foreign exchange goes is mainly importing pharmaceuticals and food items, etc. And I think the point that was raised by Senator Singh, I think it hints at something that we need to do, that is to facilitate those industries that earn foreign exchange, as opposed to those who just import and, in my view, waste foreign exchange. And I use that word loosely. So I'm glad to hear that there is a move afoot to encourage and to use our scarce foreign exchange in an area that will facilitate the growth and development of our businesses which earn foreign exchange.
Yeah, so that's in progress, and then I anticipate some resolution of that in the not too distant future, perhaps in another 2 months or so, latest. But let me also add that the TTMA is always on board with regard to encouraging our exports, and one of their policies and one program is the whole notion of thinking local and using local. So so we're thinking along manufacturing, local products as well, along with exports.
I didn't want to raise the point, but I was advised that the banking sector is not included in our domestic regime for for monitoring competition among subsectors in that industry. Yeah.
Chair, yes, it's for regulating, but it will fit into the regional.
Okay.
Let's stick to. Okay, I have another question. The trade or TTMA, and that is, I note that COTED recognized the completion of the Regional Investment Promotion Strategy, and all member states adopted it, and I would like to find out what role this regional investment promotion strategy, what role would it play in attracting increased FDI into, they said the region, but I want to know with specific reference to Trinidad and Tobago. We are part of it. What is the status of it?
The Regional Investment Promotion Strategy will not replace domestic promotion strategies. Okay. In fact, at the ministry, we are finalizing our strategy now, but it ties into, and it's a carry forum strategy. Ministers, including the Minister of Trade of Trinidad and Tobago, met in Miami, and they basically spoke about the framework and with the expectation that it will be further fleshed out at the national level. So it has not yet been, the details have not yet been finalized, but the broad framework has been discussed.
And let me just add, before finalization and adoption, it will have to go to our cabinet. Our cabinet has to have an approved position on it, and that has not yet been done. So we've been collaborating and sharing strategies and so on, and there's more or less a proposition on board, but there's no finalization unless all countries take it to their cabinets and it's fully adopted.
Okay. All right, so some of these proposals here and decisions from, I think, from COTED, really that broader policy that we are looking at, what member states might have agreed to, all these policies must go back to the member states with their own jurisdiction, with their own cabinet, and, to sync, and getting, there must be a synergy then between what is the country's policy with respect to a particular issue, and then you could look at what COTED has recommended. Is that what we are saying?
The COTED deals with a broad range of issues. They deal with bread and butter issues, like the CET, which immediately impact prices, and they deal with broad policy issues on the other end. In most cases, with the policy issues, there's a lot of to and fro because of the consultative nature and requirements of developing policy. So you can be at the stage where the consultation is taken, like for instance, at present there's a consultation on services at the CARICOM level taking place and with the agencies, stakeholder agencies in Trinidad and Tobago. And then in this case, investment promotion, this has been on the cards for a number of years, and it has matured to this point. And this is an important guide for countries as they move towards developing their own national investment promotion strategies.
Any further questions?
Yes. The question which I ask is really for the benefit of everyone. I think it's an important area, and that person should be aware of the relevance of the CBPTA at this time, which is the Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act, which has to do with our exports into the United States. And it's something that I think that the public would want to be aware of. If maybe you can give us an idea of what it means for Trinidad and what exports are covered under it, and how long this is going to last, and the impact of U.S. politics on the CBPTA.
Well, in terms of our trade with the United States, we also do not have a one-on-one trade agreement. What we have is a non-reciprocal preferential trade arrangement. So there are two elements, the CBERA and the CBTPA. The CBERA was the first of the arrangement, and it's from time to time it goes back to the U.S. Congress, I think, for renewal. And then there's the CBTPA, which introduced additional products into the arrangement. And they carry the CBTPA expires in 2023. So we have these two arrangements for which Trinidad and Tobago will benefit and continue to benefit. In fact, most of our exports to the U.S. Falls under these arrangements. The area that we, like in Canada, the area that we would really want to add is in the area of services, because these are essentially goods arrangements. So these are critical for our continued access to the U.S.
Thank you. Mr. Foreign Affairs, I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming to you now. Mr. George.
All right, thank you, Chair. Just to add quickly to what the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Trade have said, you have a scenario where the duties can actually be a prohibition for our exports actually getting into the market. So once it is you have this kind of arrangement where the US would have removed the duties, it actually makes our goods much more competitive. And again, let me just thank the Ministry of Trade and the Government of Trinidad and Tobago for whatever it does to ensure that we actually benefit from these kind of arrangements. These are the kind of legislative frameworks which would actually allow our exports to continue to be successful.
Thank you. P.S. Mrs. Daniel. Mrs. Daniel, tell me something. We have been talking around a lot to trade. We spoke to health. We spoke to the TTMA, and you would have heard it all. Are there any challenges within the Foreign Affairs Ministry that you can identify? I'm just asking. It's something that's been on my mind. Are there any challenges in the Foreign Affairs Ministry? Because you are that overarching ministry. There's a Foreign Affairs Committee. Is there anything you can do to promote if there are challenges? How could we deal with it? And what are the initiatives you can use to promote what they have been saying, especially TTMA as well as trade, from where you sit?
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Essentially, through the network of missions and consulates that the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs is responsible for, there is the opportunity, because there are persons on the ground, to really exploit opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, having said that, I mean, there are persons on the ground, like any other ministry in our current context, because of financial constraints, we have to recognize that we need to maximize the persons we have. Now, within the various missions, there's the scope for having, for instance, trade attaches and energy attaches and so on. The recognition at this point is that we are not seeing that is how we will be able to resource the various missions. But instead, what we are recognizing is that the need at headquarters to link up in a stronger way with the various ministries and the other ministries to ensure that we have the information and resources that we can then filter out to the missions. Now, I need to add that before ambassadors, for instance, and high commissioners go out to post, there is an intensive period of preparation, which includes meetings with the Ministry of Trade and officials and persons from the various chambers and TTMA and so on. And the idea is that you are providing the person who will be carrying the mantle with a perspective that tells you have to be on the lookout for opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago. And that continues as they go out. I'm thinking, for instance, of our person in Brazil who very recently, because of an opportunity that he saw, he has linked up and has been receiving material from, I think it might be through the TTMA, but material from the private sector in terms of businesses and opportunities. So that is a vital part of it, the preparation that goes into, and of course the heads of mission, when they're going out to post, they are actually equipped physically. They take material, which again, the intention is that they would be able to utilize and to look for opportunities. The ministry, recognizing that there is a government policy, each mission has been mandated to develop an annual work plan, which again would tie back to government's agenda in terms of ensuring that you have developed strategies to accomplish the objectives in terms of trade and in terms of tourism, whatever area is pertinent given the jurisdiction that you are at. And of course, there's a system of reporting. I think most of all, Chair, the recognition, and in fact, the terminology was used at a recent heads meeting discussing these very matters, actually, not for the purpose of today, but in terms of the work of the ministry. There has to be the recognition that the foreign policy and all of its components of Trinidad and Tobago doesn't belong to the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, but that it is the responsibility of all of government in terms of ministries and departments. So one of the things we have to do, and there is the place for relationships, and we have to continue to build our relationships even with line ministries, so that when we reach out for input and for assistance, that the recognition is that this is not foreign affairs work, foreign and CARICOM affairs work, this is our work, because we are building a product that we are building Trinidad and Tobago, so that the strategy primarily would entail at headquarters building up capacity in terms of a focus that can then be filtered out to the missions, rather than what would probably be the desirable thing, but the thing that we cannot pursue now, having separate attaches who would be focusing on various areas. So stronger linkages with ministries and departments being the strategy and the way.
All right, I have a question. I know Mr. Charles will speak, but let me ask you a question, Mrs. Daniel. Let me see if I can craft it properly. Mrs. Daniel, you have just said, because I was speaking this morning and I was focusing on TTMA and trade with respect to pushing the private sector, looking for investments, trying to implement, or not implement, to promote the marketability of Trinidad and Tobago in the region internationally. But you've just said that in each of the missions overseas, there is a trade attaché.
I said, on the contrary, there is the facility. The facility is supposed to be available, but we do not actually currently have
a trade attaché in most of them. You have in a few. Do you?
At the moment, no.
Oh, no.
No, so, may I add? But for instance, in Cuba, there would be a trade facilitation office, so which is a different structure. So you have several structures. You can have the availability of a trade attaché, and in the case of Cuba, there was a pilot and many years ago under Lake Kent Valley, and so there was a trade facilitation office there which does the same work, which is the promotion of trade and the facilitation of investments as well, but largely the facilitation of trade, and it has proven to be a very useful exercise. Yes. Over the years, and so that I'm sure that the government is considering the likelihood of such a structure being put in place in other areas, and also the facilitation of trade attaches in those key countries, those key markets that we are targeting for penetration. Okay. But what she's also saying is substantially, it remains the role of the ambassador or the high commissioner there and staff to continue to promote and facilitate trade and investments.
Yes,
am I right?
And for the ministry to be able to continue to equip the missions as well.
Well,
the ministries, and I said the ministry, but I should correct myself. Yeah. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, but co-opting and utilizing the resources of other ministries to be able to equip.
And I'll tell you why I'm a little bit concerned, because to me, I see these high commissioners, the high commissions at embassies, all over, as really also facilitating trade, not so? I think that's one of their basic objectives, to facilitate trade. Trade and investments. So therefore, Mr. Charles, you'll have your say just now. So therefore, I've kind of lost for words. I would really like, through you, Mrs. Daniel, to really work on that little gray area there. Because we have these people all over, and especially at this point in time, we are behind trade, we're behind the TTMA, what you all are doing about trade and whatnot. But we also have resources all across internationally who could also assist. And I tell you why I am flagging this, because take for example, and you're correct when you said that you need to have a synergy between foreign affairs and other ministries. For example, community development. So you go down to, let's say you're in Australia, and you want to promote Trinidad and Tobago. Naturally, you need to connect with somebody here, some ministry here, community development and culture. I would like to have a steel band. I like to get some kind of mass. I want a calypsonian, etc., to come out there. So, and you know something? Sometimes the ministry will respond and say, we don't have the budget, the budgetary. We are constrained basically by our budget. We can't do that. So that is why I think there's supposed to be a little things, you know, we need to sharpen up there a little bit. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. In that, I thought that in all, you know, in your embassies and your high commissions and whatnot, there was a desk there that would facilitate trade. In all of them, I thought that was standard practice, to facilitate that trade and to assist Ministry of Trade, assist TTMA, you know, through foreign affairs. But that's what foreign affairs is about, you know, trade, investments. So what can you do? I know you've said, look, we are working on this, but what can you do in the shortest possible time to promote that?
For clarification, Chair, with respect to the preparation of the ambassadors and high commissioners, so that before they go off to post, there is an intensive preparation at base, at headquarters, and it involves interfacing with the various ministries. So for instance, trade and all of the other key ministries for investment and so on. And they actually are prepared, and they go with material, the high commission, the persons who are to be posted. And as part of that process, they would be equipped with very specific tools for wherever their area, wherever they would be posted to. So that does take place. It's part of the preparation process, even before they go out, that they are equipped and that they are prepared.
Mrs. Daniel, how successful have they been? How successful? They are equipped, they are trained, they interact with all the various ministries before leaving. They have material, they reach their base, they reach their destination. So I have gone to Australia, I've gone to Utopia, I've gone here, I've gone there. How successful are these people, these high commissioners and whatnot? Do you have any sort of mechanism where you can track and say, okay, we have done X amount of business, they have done so much trade, or they have facilitated, all right, an increase in trade to Trinidad because they have started new ventures in this country with Trinidad. Tell me, what mechanism do you have to track the success of these people?
It may not be particularly qualitative, but in terms of, there is a reporting mechanism that involves ensuring that from the point of view of there's a focus that has to be given. So in terms of trade and all of the other areas, the high commissioners and ambassadors have to report on a quarterly basis back to headquarters. Now, what we are really treating with is a context where, notwithstanding that we have the missions, we recognize that we do not have the full complement of support persons. It means, therefore, that the High Commissioner, Ambassador, together with whatever foreign service staff is assigned a mission, has to drive the process. So that, as I said, I cannot assess quantitatively, but there is a reporting mechanism and there are opportunities that are tapped. And maybe the challenge is for us to do more in terms of the quantitative sort of approach, and that we can certainly explore. But I am of the view that the reporting mechanism is vital, and it provides it requires ambassadors to account. And
maybe I could just support. You would recall that many of our ambassadors have only gone out in the last few months, and therefore when the appointment may have taken place a little earlier by the Honourable Prime Minister. However, you have to wait for the receiving countries to actually approve their arrival into their countries, and that is sometimes a delayed process. So many of our ambassadors, high commissioners, have just gone out. Some of them have not received their instruments of appointment by the receiving state in which they now reside just yet for the number of countries that they are accountable for. However, I want to make the point that even in the Ministry of Trade, we have been having constant collaboration and feedback with those that have already been appointed, and I will tell you that the process is in place. There's constant dialogue. If I can say, for example, in Jamaica, where there may have appeared to be some issues with regard to trade and foreign affairs, the High Commissioner who's there now, High Commissioner Jeffrey, is in close contact with me and with the Permanent Secretary and sometimes even anticipating issues which may arise, so that the collaboration is there. And it will be there with other ministries as well, not only the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As the Permanent Secretary did imply, they are almost a post office ministry. So that is not everything that goes directly to them. So that I know it may be an agricultural issue, and the minister would be, the ambassador, high commissioner, would be in contact with the Ministry of Agriculture. And I can tell you that there is collaboration, and that they are armed, and that they are ready, and they are doing their work, and it's time. It's only with time that we will begin to see outcomes. But I think that they are they're well respected individuals that are out there, and that they are, and they have settled in well, and they are collaborating. And as I said, the integration with the ministry here at home, it is there. In fact, all of the ministries. So it's only a matter of time before we begin to see results.
I want to pick up from, because I think I was understanding the chair from a totally different standpoint. As to standards, if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would have standards where, regardless of what governments come in place, to whatever, there are standard operational standards with regards to foreign bodies, our consulates, our ambassadors. Who are they? Because if there are no checks and balances from the standpoint, how do we determine the specific areas of development in regards to our foreign people, based on if there are shortcomings? For instance, the chair was talking about their input into marketing, Trinidad and Tobago, and trade and stuff like that. And for some reason, how do we determine if we are succeeding effectively in that way? And if there is need for further development, further reassessing of how we operate out there, how do we determine that if there are no serious assessments of the things? I'm trying to get that idea from what it.
What I would say is that for each administration, there would be a strategic focus, and that becomes the measure, so that there is a policy document, for instance, currently, and it is consistent with that the strategy of the of the ministry and of the Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, the thrust would emanate from the policy of the government of the day. And throughout, annually, there would be a review in relation to the accomplishment of the policies as determined by the government.
And through you to the acting permanent secretary. And it relates to the point about quantitative responses and analysis. Do you think the time has come, given the situation that we are in now, where we need to diversify our economy, and where our foreign missions are our main outposts in some of our main trading partners, the time has come to set specific, measurable, achievable, realistic timelines to achieve the goal of diversifying our trade? And for example, has the ministry set a target of, say, we need to increase, that the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs will assist Trinidad and Tobago by increasing our trade in these markets by 10% in X time frame? Because that is the only way a first world country could assess whether or not we have achieved what we say we have to achieve. In fact, I was part of the process where I was trained, and I was told, even then, 6 years ago, that we had to diversify, and our main mission was to facilitate trade. But what was lacking were the specific measurable goals, so that at the end of a year, they could say, Rodney Charles, your goal was to increase trade in Brazil by 4%, you have achieved 2%, and then I'll say, maybe I didn't do it because of these reasons, etc. Is the ministry moving to that kind of a reporting situation?
I just want to say that I don't know that you can hold an ambassador, a high commissioner responsible to a target, because it's all one integrated trade and investment policy, and everything is all coming, it's one target for the country. So it's an integrated policy. And so that they may pick up on a lead, they may provide a lead. The ministry, another ministry, will then attach itself to the proposal, and so that there are different angles, and so it's a cohesive approach. And as I said, it must be one integrated investment policy. So I think as the government may want to attach itself to its targets and with regard to growing trade and investments. But in case of trade, it will be the Ministry of Trade and Industry. But I don't know that you could hold an ambassador or high commissioner responsible for particular targets, as I said, if it is that the end result is an integrated one and the approach is a cohesive one.
Thank you very much, but I never said that we'll hold the ambassadors accountable. I'm saying, has the ministry identified specific targets to facilitate government's policy of
specific targets? What I would add is that, and I know the focus here is on trade, the ministry's, the work of a mission goes beyond trade. It is multifaceted, as you would be aware, so that trade is just one aspect of what the mission is involved in. And no, at this time, we don't have quantitative measures, and I am sure that there would be possibility to explore that sort of approach subsequently. Of course, we are still in the process of outfitting in terms of the human resource, our missions. And that is part of our reality, that even as we are transitioning, and basically, I think the main thrust for the ministry at this time is ensuring that all persons, whether you are at headquarters or you have been posted, that everyone is on the ball so that we are all working towards the same product, the very same product. Because we cannot, I think realistically, we recognize that a lot of what has to be done would have to be done from headquarters.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Daniel. It's 12:20, and we have other meetings, and I want to say how pleased I am with this morning's proceedings. I wish I had more time, but in the new year, I'm sure I will want to have another sitting with this group. I now invite closing comments, and we'll start with the officials from the Ministry of Health, the Permanent Secretary, followed by the Permanent Secretary at Ministry of Trade, followed by Foreign Affairs, and Mr. George from the TTMA, in that order. Thank you.
Chair and members, thank you once again for this opportunity that you have provided us here today, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Lovely, brief, lovely. Yes.
Chair, I want to say, on behalf of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, I want to say to you and the rest of the members, special thank you for engaging us in this exercise, because we recognize in the context of the economy at this state that we have a very special role to play. Yes. And we are available to discuss any way in which we can help and you can help and we can dialogue. We are willing to participate, and just like my colleague in the Ministry of Health, to offer special season greetings to you and the members. Thank you.
Mrs. Daniel.
Chair, I would want to echo what my colleagues have shared, and I would want to emphasize that the accomplishment of a Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs is not simply from the work of the Ministry of CARICOM Affairs, and fora like this reminds us that our work is accomplished as we link up with our partners in the various ministries and departments. So we will continue, and we do that already, and we will continue to deepen and strengthen those linkages. And as the former persons have shared, compliments of the season as well. Thank you.
Mr. George, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to be, as a civil society organization here. The government continues to engage the non-state actors, which is quite applaudable. The TTM is appreciative of that. Thank you very much, and as the others would have said, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
And finally, I want to thank members of the media. I want to thank all the parliamentary staff who have assisted and worked with us during the last couple of months. To the viewing and listening audience, I say to you, Merry Christmas. Have a safe and secured Christmas. And for 2017, I wish you all the best, blessings, and a productive 2017. I thank you. This meeting now is adjourned.